Evil is a luxury for people who can afford moral categories.
Entry 1. South Side, Chicago, 1952. Found this composition book in Ma's sewing basket. Figured it was time to start keeping proper records. A man needs to document his development, his understanding of how things really work. This ain't for anybody else's eyes. This is precision work. Chapter 1. Mask and Stage. The South Side in the 40s was the kind of place where you either learned order or went under. I don't remember warmth or kids laughing much. What I remember is the L rattling overhead like iron sermons, and Ma always trying to scrub out the sound of the old man with that raggedy dish rag of hers. Everything was strict, hard, necessary. Being nice wasn't a virtue, it was a trick. But order? Order was religion. My father was the priest of that religion. Didn't need no Bible. He had his belt. Hung on the wall like a quiet pointer, ready to show you the truth any old time. I didn't call it punishment later on. I called it correction. See, punishment sounds like somebody's being mean just to be mean. Correction sounds like duty. When that belt sang, it was like tuning an instrument that had gone flat. Ma tried to be a cushion between us, but cushions get worn down if you use them long enough. She'd smooth tablecloths like she could iron out the creases in our faces, too. She was wrong about that. The neighborhood was full of broken men shuffling to the steel mills. Wives hanging laundry like surrender flags. Kids with dirty faces and emptier bellies. But I saw something they didn't. Patterns. Mrs. Kowalski always beat her rugs on Tuesdays. Mr. Brennan always stopped at Murphy's before going home. Came out smelling like medicine that made him brave enough to face his own front door. The Petrovich boy always took the long way past Sarah McKenna's house, slowing down like he was counting something only he could see. I cataloged it all, not because I cared. Caring's a luxury for people who got time to waste. I cataloged because information is currency, and even at 10, I understood the principle of saving for something bigger. Later on, they'll call me a monster. But monsters don't carry grocery bags for old ladies. Monsters don't hold doors or tip their hat to the preacher. Truth is, you saw what I let you see. Masks don't lie. They just show the shape that's needed. The first lesson came early. People see what they expect to see. Ma expected a good boy who helped with chores and minded his manners. The neighbors expected a polite kid who said yes, sir, and no, ma'am, in all the right places. Father Kelly expected a faithful lamb who sat still during Mass and remembered his catechism. So that's what I gave them. Perfect manufacture, quality control, customer satisfaction guaranteed. It wasn't lying. Lying implies you're hiding something shameful. I was providing a service, giving people the comfort of their own expectations. when Mrs. O'Malley smiled at me for helping her with her groceries. That smile was payment for a job well done. When Father Kelly praised my devotion during confession, that praise was receipt of goods delivered. Business transaction, pure and simple. Chapter 2. Hurt and Crutch. That sharp whistle my father made through his teeth, that was the metronome of my childhood. Short, sharp, merciless. It announced the blow, but worse than the blow was waiting for it. I called it correction. Correction's an investment, see? Pain today, order tomorrow. Some kids broke under it. Me, I got smooth. Smooth surfaces reflect better, and I wanted to control what showed up in that reflection. The old man worked the night shift at Republic Steel. Came home smelling like fire and metal shavings. Hands stained black no amount of scrubbing could fix. He'd sit in his chair. Nobody else's chair, mind you, just his. And point at things that needed correcting. A crooked picture frame. A smudge on the window. Me breathing too loud while I did my arithmetic. Boy, he'd say. Not using my name because names were for people who'd earned them. Boy, you see that mess you made. I learned to see messes that weren't there. Better to apologize for nothing than to miss something real. Better to fix what wasn't broken than to let something stay broken that should have been perfect. The belt taught me that much. But here's what the belt couldn't teach. What the old man never figured out. Every time he raised his hand, he was giving me information. His breathing changed first. Shorter, through the nose. His jaw muscles jumped. Little earthquake warnings. His left eye twitched exactly twice before his arm moved. By the time I was 8, I could predict his corrections better than a weatherman predicts rain. School was like a marketplace. Everyone was selling something. Muscle, jokes, good grades. I sold attention. I listened, remembered, nodded. Anybody who owed me something was already in my pocket. Pity was worthless, but favors paid interest. I understood the principle of keeping books long before anyone taught me numbers. Tommy Kowalski was the first real test case. Big kid, slow mind, fists like hammers. Used to take lunch money from anyone smaller, which was most everybody. But Tommy had a secret. He couldn't read worth a damn. And Sister Margaret was getting suspicious about his book reports. I offered to help. Read him the stories. Gave him the important parts to remember. Even wrote out some answers he could copy in his own clumsy handwriting. In return, Tommy became my insurance policy. Nobody took my lunch money. Nobody shoved me around. All it cost me was 20 minutes every few days, reading adventure stories to a bully who turned red as a beet whenever words got too long. Business transaction. Sometimes my ticker would skip. Sometimes my head would buzz. I used that. Called them attacks. A word that demanded understanding. Instead of weakness, it became an excuse. I figured out early, even sickness can be a resource if you label it right. The first real attack happened during arithmetic. Mrs. Patterson was droning on about fractions, and suddenly the room started spinning, like somebody was stirring it with a giant spoon. My chest got tight. Couldn't catch my breath. Felt like drowning in air. Scared me more than the old man's belt ever did, because this was something I couldn't predict or control. But afterward, when Mrs. Patterson sent me to the nurse, and the nurse sent me home early, I realized something valuable. People treat sick different than they treat weak. Weak gets punished. Sick gets sympathy. And sympathy, properly managed, could be more useful than strength. My father never saw enough in me, but every not enough was like a polishing cloth. Other kids got soft from being hurt. I got shiny. That's the difference. The old man wanted a son who'd work steel like him, come home black-handed and bent-backed, proud of honest labor and honest exhaustion. What he got was something else entirely. Something that watched him with careful eyes and took notes on his weaknesses. Every man's got them. Points where pressure applied just right can shift the whole structure. The old man's weakness was his image. Couldn't stand the neighbors thinking he wasn't in control of his own house. So when I started having my attacks in public places, during church, at the company picnic, once in front of his supervisor's wife, suddenly I wasn't such a disappointment. Suddenly I was a cross to bear, a burden that proved his Christian patience. From disappointment to martyrdom in 6 months. That's what you call successful rebranding. Chapter 3, Trick and Test. A trick ain't a con. A trick is proof that attention can be shaped. I discovered hands early on. When you take someone's hand, you take a piece of what they are. A grip, not too firm, not too soft. A look that lasts just long enough. That's signing a contract. Down at Kowalski's Hardware, I'd leaf through catalogs like they were scripture. Locks, bolts, chains. Not signs of mistrust, but symbols of respect. A good lock says, somebody here keeps order. I soak that up. Order through objects. Order through symbols. Mr. Kowalski himself was a study in human mechanics. Polish immigrant, thick accent. Hands like leather gloves stuffed with gravel. Customers sometimes got impatient with his English. Talked to him like he was slow instead of foreign. But I noticed how his eyes sharpened when money changed hands. How he never made mistakes with the register, despite mixing up his prepositions. I started hanging around the store after school, offering to sweep up or organize stock. Didn't ask for payment. Payment would have made it a job. This was an education. I watched how Mr. Kowalski handled different customers. Smiled bigger for the ones who looked down on him. Charged them more, too. Talked straight with the regulars, the neighborhood men who treated him like family. then with the troublemakers, the kids who came in looking to cause problems or steal something small. He had a special technique. He'd watch them in the circular mirror mounted in the corner. Wouldn't say nothing. Just let them know they were being seen. Most kids got nervous and left. The stupid ones tried something anyway, and found themselves facing Mr. Kowalski with a tire iron in his hands, and a very clear understanding of consequences. I borrowed that mirror trick, not for stopping thieves, for collecting information. People act different when they think nobody's watching. Mrs. Chen picking through the penny candy with her fingers before buying a nickel's worth. Father Kelly checking his reflection in the store window, smoothing his hair like he was concerned about earthly vanity. Mr. Patterson counting his change twice, 3 times, like he was worried somebody might cheat him. Small things, private things, things they probably forgot about 5 minutes later. But I remembered everything. I tested boundaries. Borrow a book and return it before it was missed. Find a key before it was lost. Spread a rumor that had no teeth, just lips. Little experiments. Little proofs. I figured out. People are engines. You adjust the air. You change the mixture. You adjust the spark. They start or stall. Control is mechanics. The rumor test was particularly educational. I started something small about Mrs. Patterson, the arithmetic teacher. Nothing mean, nothing that would hurt her. Just that she'd been seen talking to Mr. Bradley, the 6th grade teacher, after school hours. True fact, actually. I'd observed them grading papers together, perfectly innocent. But I presented it with just enough raised eyebrow to make it interesting. Within a week, that innocent fact had grown legs. Mrs. Patterson was sweet on Mr. Bradley. They were keeping company. Someone's cousin's friend had seen them holding hands. By the end of the month, half the neighborhood was planning their wedding, and the other half was scandalized because Mrs. Patterson was supposedly still mourning her husband who'd died in the Pacific. I watched it spread like spilled ink, darkening everything it touched. And I learned something valuable. People hunger for stories, especially stories that make them feel like they're in possession of secret knowledge. Give them the first sentence, and they'll write the whole book themselves. Later they'll say, manipulation. I say responsibility. Because when nobody's holding the strings, they get tangled. The same folks who scream about that are the ones who were hollering for freedom before. The key test came courtesy of Mr. O'Brien, who ran the corner newsstand. Forgetful man, always leaving his cash box unlocked, his keys lying around. I started noticing his patterns, his weaknesses, not to exploit them, just to understand them. Understanding is its own reward. One Tuesday afternoon, I found his keys on the counter next to the register. Mr. O'Brien was in the back room, arguing with his supplier about late deliveries. The keys were just sitting there, 3 feet from my hand, waiting. pick them up. Not to steal anything. Not to break into a store later. Just to see what it felt like to hold another man's access. His permissions. His ability to open and close doors. Weighed more than I expected. And the metal was warm from sitting in the afternoon sun. Almost like they were alive. I put them back exactly where I found them. Mr. O'Brien never knew they'd been moved. But I knew. And that knowledge was worth more than whatever money might have been in his cash box. Chapter 4. Control. Control isn't passion. It's temperature. A thermometer you read. 98.6. Everything normal. I kept my days in that range. I was a precinct worker. Checked off names. Sorted lists. Stuck little flags in things. Politics wasn't thunder and lightning. Politics was pencil work. Control the lists. Control the faces. They'd nod at me without knowing why. A nod is the little sister of a signature. Election day was like Christmas for people who understood the real business of democracy. Not the speeches and flag waving, the counting, the names on lists, the signatures that matched or didn't quite match, the ballots that got counted and the ones that somehow went missing. I was 12, but Mr. Murphy, who ran our precinct, said I had the neatest handwriting he'd ever seen on a kid, and more sense than most adults about keeping proper records. I spent that whole day watching men and women line up to participate in a great American ritual of choosing their own masters. Most of them had no idea who they were voting for, beyond the party line. No understanding of the issues, beyond what they'd heard their neighbors saying. But they felt important, walking into that booth, pulling those levers, exercising their sacred democratic right. What they didn't see was me in the corner, making careful notes about who showed up and who didn't. Mrs. Kowalski voted Democratic, like always, but her husband didn't show up because he was working a double shift. The Brennan family came in together, but only the husband actually voted. The wife and kids just waited outside. Mr. Peterson from the corner house argued with the poll worker about his registration, claimed someone had stolen his identity, but his signature looked shaky, like maybe he'd been testing his signature with his left hand. Information, currency, investment in future transactions. Church was controlled too. Not God. The coins you collected there. Duty, industry, humility. All minted the same. Nobody checks them. I took them, spent them, got trust back. Perfect circulation. Father Kelly was a student of human nature. Had to be in his line of work. Confession taught him things about his parishioners that they'd never tell their own wives, their own mothers. Secrets are power, and the confessional was like a savings bank for secrets. I never told Father Kelly anything important during my confessions. Just small sins. Venial stuff about lying to my mother or fighting with other kids. But I listened carefully when he talked to other people after Mass, when he thought nobody was paying attention. The way he'd look at Mr. Brennan, like he knew something heavy and sad. The careful distance he kept from Mrs. Chen, like she was contagious with something worse than disease. The special kindness he showed to young Mary Sullivan, like she needed extra protection from something that hadn't happened yet, but probably would. A priest who really listened to confessions would go mad inside a month. So Father Kelly had learned to listen selectively, to remember strategically, to offer advice that sounded spiritual, but was really just common sense wrapped in Latin phrases. Smart man. Practical man. I respected that. When my body stumbled, I adjusted. Air, fuel, spark. Mechanical principle. People want to hear, I'll take care of it. Say that, and they hand you responsibility like a suitcase they never want back. Control is hygiene. Rooms without supervision decay. People without supervision do too. The attacks were becoming more frequent, more useful. Not just the physical symptoms, the racing heart, the dizzy spells, the feeling like my skin didn't fit right, but the way people responded to them. Sudden concern, immediate attention, willingness to excuse almost anything as long as it was medical instead of moral. I started keeping a private catalog of which symptoms worked best with which audiences. Ma responded to anything that suggested I might be seriously ill. Chest pains, trouble breathing, fainting spells. The old man paid attention only to things that looked like weakness he could correct. Headaches, stomach trouble, general tiredness. Teachers wanted dramatic but not disruptive. Pale complexion, quiet suffering. Brave attempts to continue despite obvious distress. The key was variety. Use the same symptom too often, and people start to suspect. But rotate through a collection of related problems, and you've got a medical mystery that demands ongoing attention and consideration. By spring of 1952, I had established myself as a delicate boy with a mysterious constitution. Not sickly enough to be useless, not healthy enough to be ignored. The perfect balance of capability and vulnerability. Chapter 5, Crack in the Facade. It was an afternoon like any other. Yellow light, the street shining like butter on brick. There was this dog. No barking, just looking. Long, piercing, unbearably still. Dogs are mirrors that don't lie, and this one saw right through my skin. The dog belonged to Mrs. Novak, old woman who lived alone in the house with the green shutters. Mixed breed, probably part German Shepherd, part something mean and smart. Most dogs in the neighborhood were friendly enough, used to kids, willing to accept a pat on the head or a scrap of food. This one was different. This one had opinions. I was walking home from Kowalski's, carrying the small bag of nails for the old man's latest project. Taking my time, observing the usual patterns. Mrs. Chen hanging laundry. Mr. Patterson washing his Ford. The Brennan kids playing stickball in the street, arguing about rules they were making up as they went along. Normal day, normal route, normal mask in place. Polite boy, helpful son, neighborhood fixture. I saw the dog sitting on Mrs. Novak's front step, watching me approach. Not panting, not wagging, not showing any of the usual dog behaviors. Just watching with eyes that seemed too old for its head, too knowing for an animal that should have been concerned with simple things like food and territory and pack hierarchy. My ticker stumbled. Not from fear, but because I realized the mask didn't work here. No tricks, no smile, just eyes that knew. For one breath, my knees buckled, and I felt something cold crawl through a hole that wasn't in the blueprints. I tried the usual techniques. Friendly wave, like I was greeting a neighbor's pet. Soft whistle, the kind that usually brought dogs running with tongues hanging out and tails wagging. Even pulled a piece of bread from my pocket, left over from lunch, offering it like a peace treaty. The dog didn't move, didn't blink, just kept staring with that impossible knowledge, like it could see through the careful construction of my public face to something underneath that even I didn't fully understand yet. The dog was silence with teeth. It showed me that cracks don't start with thunder. They start with a look that won't back down. I walked on, pulled my coat tighter though nobody was watching. That evening I laid my hands side by side. Steady, firm, but in my head a bare wire was humming. I started avoiding Mrs. Novak Street. Took the long way home. Added 5 minutes to my walk. Disrupted my carefully planned routes. Told myself it was just efficiency. That I'd found a better path. But I knew the truth. That dog had seen something. Recognized something. And I couldn't afford to have that kind of attention focused on me. Animals operate on different principles than people. People see what they expect to see, what fits their understanding of how the world should work. Animals see what is. And what that dog saw in me was something that didn't match the careful image I'd constructed for human consumption. I wrote myself new phrases. Sure thing, I'll help. Of course, that's only right. Words like spackle. Rub them into the surface long enough. The crack looks like shine. That's facade maintenance. Not lying. Preservation. But the phrases felt different now. Thinner somehow. Like they needed more layers to do the same job. The dog had created a doubt, a small question mark that hadn't been there before. Not in other people. They still saw what they expected to see. But in me, I started checking my reflection more often, studying my own face for signs of whatever the dog had recognized. Looking back, I think that was the first real crack. Not in the facade. That held steady for years longer. But in my confidence that the facade was perfect, that my control was complete, that I understood all the variables in the equation of social interaction. That dog taught me that there were kinds of vision I hadn't accounted for. Kinds of knowledge I couldn't manipulate or manage, and was a valuable lesson, even if I didn't appreciate it at the time. Chapter 6. Turning the mirror. Honesty's overrated. Mirrors are truths with angles. An inch higher, you look more charitable. An inch lower, you look stronger. The angle is the truth. I made myself catalogs. Punctual, hardworking, neat, responsible, community man. Closing line. I always did my best. That was my mirror. Look into it. You saw the neighbor, the entertainer, the precinct worker. Nobody saw the ledger behind it. Debts, favors, obligations. Bookkeeping, nothing more. The catalogs weren't just lists. They were engineering specifications. Blueprints for the construction of a public identity that would serve multiple purposes across various social contexts. Each trait had been tested, refined, proven effective through careful observation and strategic deployment. Punctual. Arrived 5 minutes early for everything, whether it was Mass on Sunday or helping Mr. Kowalski inventory stock. People noticed punctuality because it was rare, especially among kids. It suggested reliability, respect for other people's time, maturity beyond my years. More importantly, it gave me opportunities to observe situations before they officially began, to study the players when they thought the game hadn't started yet. Hardworking. Never turned down a request for help, no matter how inconvenient. Carried groceries, shoveled snow, delivered messages, ran errands. Not out of the goodness of my heart. Goodness was another luxury I couldn't afford. But because helpful people became necessary people, and necessary people gained access to information and opportunities that were denied to the merely pleasant. Neat. Clothes clean and pressed, hair combed, shoes shined, fingernails trimmed. Personal hygiene is social communication. Needs suggested self-respect, family values, attention to detail. It also made me memorable in a positive way. Adults would point me out to their own children as an example of how young people should present themselves. Responsible. Could be trusted with small amounts of money, simple tasks, minor secrets. Built up slowly through a series of successful completions, like building credit at the bank. Start with returning exact change from the grocery store. Graduate to keeping the neighbor's spare key while they visited relatives. Eventually become the person people called when they needed something done right. Community man. Participated in neighborhood activities. Attended church regularly. Showed appropriate respect for local institutions and authority figures. Not because I believed in any of it, but because participation provided cover, legitimacy, and access to the internal workings of social structures. Each element of the catalog reinforced the others. Punctuality made my helpfulness more valuable. Neatness made my responsibility more believable. Community participation made everything else look like natural expressions of good character, rather than calculated performances. Self-pity was my private shirt. He never accepted me. A line for evenings when the apartment went quiet. Soft, wearable, but not for outside. Outside you wore order. The self-pity served a specific function. Emotional maintenance. Even the most carefully constructed identity needed regular adjustment, and private moments of manufactured vulnerability helped prevent real cracks from developing in the public facade. Better to schedule the weakness than to have it arrive unexpectedly. He never accepted me. Was particularly useful because it contained just enough truth to feel authentic. The old man genuinely didn't understand what I was becoming. Genuinely preferred the idea of a son who would follow in his footsteps without question or innovation. But his disappointment was a resource, not a wound. It justified any future decisions that might seem inconsistent with neighborhood expectations. If I ever needed to explain unusual behavior, unusual choices, unusual knowledge or capabilities, I could always point to the fundamental rejection at the heart of my family life. People understood that children who weren't properly loved sometimes developed in unexpected directions. It was a get-out-of-jail-free card, kept in reserve for situations that required emergency character revision. Chapter 7. Last line. This ain't a confession. This is a record. This first entry should work like a handshake. Firm, controlled, binding enough that you come back. They'll claim later they suspected something. People are smart backwards. I let them. For today, I've opened the room, set the stage, positioned the mirror at the right angle. A man isn't born. A man is made. I'm made. From belts, lists, and mirrors. Nothing wobbles. Where there are cracks, I polish. What shines, stays. The neighborhood thinks it knows me. Helpful boy, polite to adults, reliable in small matters. They've seen my public face so many times they've forgotten it's a face at all. It's become truth through repetition, reality through consensus, fact through social agreement. But I know something they don't know. I know the difference between being and seeming, between truth and effectiveness, between what is and what works. And I know that the gap between those things is where real power lives. This composition book will be my laboratory notebook. Every entry an experiment. Every observation a data point. Every interaction a test case in the ongoing project of social engineering. Not for evil purposes. Evil is a luxury for people who can afford moral categories. This is for understanding, for control, for the construction of something unprecedented in the narrow world of this South Side neighborhood. By the time I'm finished, they'll never see me coming. Not because I'm hiding, but because I'll be exactly what they expect to see. Right up until the moment I choose to be something else entirely. Order stays. Everything else is negotiable. End of entry 1.
I trust you enjoyed this glimpse into a most curious diary. If so, leave behind a small token of your delight with a like, and do consider joining our circle by subscribing. And remember, ring the little bell, and you shall be the very first to know when another diary or a fresh entry emerges from the shadows. And if a whisper stirs in your mind, a thought, a riddle, perhaps a name of someone whose secrets you would dare to uncover, leave it for me below. I read them one by one. And who knows, your wish may guide my hand to the very next diary I choose from my collection.